They found the letter on the floor of Whitmore's study. Not immediately. His housekeeper discovered it at 7:20 in the morning, pushed beneath the study door at some point in the night by a hand that had not knocked, had not announced itself, had arrived in the dark and left before dawn like a message from something that did not want to be named. She brought it to him with his coffee, and he read it standing at the window with the gray light of a London morning coming in flat and colorless from the east, and when he finished reading it, he set it on the desk very carefully, with the deliberateness of a man who is managing a physical response he will not permit himself to have. The letter was from Sir Hugh Ravenswood. It was 3 sentences long. Mr. Whitmore, I write as a friend, in the spirit of counsel rather than ultimatum, to suggest that a man in your position, whose ambitions in the northern development markets are both evident and admirable, might consider whether the social associations he has recently cultivated serve those ambitions or complicate them. Certain conversations at certain levels of influence have begun to reflect a concern that is not yet formal but could, without much difficulty, become so. I offer this in goodwill and trust it will be received in that spirit. 3 sentences. No accusation. No threat that could be quoted or challenged or met with anything except the specific, helpless fury of understanding perfectly what is being said while being unable to prove it has been said at all. Whitmore set the letter down. He thought about Evelyn. Not romantically, not in that moment, not yet. He thought about her with the analytical focus of a man who has received the first formal signal that a war has begun, and who is calculating the distance between his current position and the position he needs to reach before the next signal arrives. He thought about the Haverston ball and what she had done there, the weight of what she had done, the absolute clarity of it. And he thought about the 4 words she had written him in the letter that had arrived 2 days prior. I am still here. He picked up his pen. Across the city, at precisely the same hour, in a house in Mayfair that had not been fully quiet since the 14th of June, Evelyn Ashford was sitting at her writing desk in her dressing gown with her hair unbound, and the morning's post arranged before her with the mechanical efficiency of someone who has learned to treat each day's correspondence as intelligence to be processed before the emotions it contains are permitted to operate. There were 4 letters. One from her mother's dressmaker, regarding an appointment that seemed, in the current context, almost comically irrelevant. One from a woman she had gone to school with, whose letter had the particular quality of carefully composed warmth that indicates the writer has heard something and wants to assess the situation before committing to a position. One from Lady Cavendish, which she set aside to read last, because Lady Cavendish's letters always required her full, undistracted attention. And one with no crest and no marking, in a hand she now knew better than she knew most things. She opened Whitmore's letter first. He had written, Ravenswood has made contact. I expected this. I want you to know the sequence of what is about to happen, because you deserve to understand it before it is happening to you rather than while it is. He will begin with the contracts. I believe the Northern Consortium is already under pressure, though I have not yet confirmed this. He will then move to the social infrastructure, invitations, partnerships, the quiet withdrawal of goodwill that leaves no visible mark and creates no actionable grievance. He will do this not to destroy me. I am not, I think, destroyable in the ways he prefers to destroy people, because I did not build what I have through the networks he controls. He will do it to demonstrate to you, concretely and daily, what your refusal costs. That is the target. That has always been the target. I am telling you this not to alarm you, but because I believe you would rather see the weapon coming than discover it when it lands. C.W. She read it twice. Then she read Lady Cavendish's letter. Lady Cavendish wrote in the precise, unadorned hand of a woman who has never needed ornamentation to command attention. My dear Evelyn, I have learned this morning that Caldwell and Pierce are to write to your father regarding the outstanding account. This will arrive within the week. I believe you should know before it does. I am also, if you will permit me, going to say something that is not my place to say, and you may discard it entirely. You have chosen, and the choice is made, and what you do now matters more than what you chose. The question is no longer whether. It is how. Come and see me on Thursday. I have 2 people I want you to meet. MC. Evelyn set both letters down. She sat very still for a moment. Outside, London was performing its ordinary morning. The rattle of carts on the street below, the measured footsteps of staff beginning the day's work, the gray and indifferent sky of a city that did not slow for personal catastrophe. She thought about what was coming with the cold, exact clarity that was her most reliable instrument. The Caldwell and Pierce letter. Her father's face when it arrived. Charlotte's future, held in suspension. The weight of all of it. She had chosen with open eyes. She was going to need to keep them open. Power never shouts. It rearranges. She picked up her pen. If you were sitting where Evelyn was sitting, with those 2 letters on the desk before you, and the full knowledge of what was coming, would you hold the line? Or would you find, in the clear light of a London morning, that the choice you made at night looked different in the day? Tell me in the comments what you would do. And if stories like this have taken hold of you in the way that I think they have, subscribe. Because what is unfolding now is not scandal. Scandal is a single event. What is unfolding now is a war. And we are only at its beginning. The architecture of punishment. The Duke of Ashbourne did not take breakfast in the mornings. This was known. It was one of those personal details that circulated through his household, and then through the households adjacent to his with the quiet comprehensiveness of information about powerful men, absorbed by staff, relayed in the kitchens, eventually composited into the general social understanding of who the Duke was and how he operated. He did not take breakfast. He rose at 6, read his correspondence for 2 hours in his study with a single cup of black coffee, and met with his secretary at 8 to structure the day's business. On the morning of the 16th of June, 2 days after the Haverston ball, the business of the day had a particular quality. Sir Hugh Ravenswood arrived at 8:30. He was shown directly to the study, which indicated the meeting had been arranged in advance, which indicated the Duke had been planning for this morning before the evening of the 14th had concluded. Ravenswood was 63 years old, a former diplomat, and the Duke's oldest personal friend in the specific sense that the word friend operates among men of their class. A relationship built not on affection primarily, but on mutual utility and the shared assumption that loyalty, maintained carefully over decades, was worth considerably more than any individual transaction. He sat across from the Duke at the study desk and listened as the Duke spoke, quietly, methodically, without heat, about the situation. The Duke said, "I do not intend to pursue this emotionally. That would be beneath both of us and beneath the situation." "No," Ravenswood agreed. "Whitmore is the variable," the Duke said. "She is, whatever she currently believes, a woman whose position is circumscribed by practical realities that have not changed simply because she has chosen to ignore them. Whitmore, however, is a man who has persuaded her that the practical realities are more flexible than they are. That persuasion needs to be unmade." Ravenswood said, "The Northern contracts?" "Begin there," the Duke said. Not aggressively. Quietly. A concern raised here, a question introduced there. I want him to feel the pressure before he can identify its source. By the time he traces it, if he traces it, 3 months will have passed, and the damage will be ambient. And Miss Ashford? The Duke was quiet for a moment. She will be made to see, he said, what her position actually is. Not told. Shown. There is a difference. Women of her intelligence respond to argument with counter-argument. It is, I admit, one of the qualities I found remarkable about her. But argument cannot be sustained against the accumulated weight of daily material consequence. Every morning she wakes and finds another door closed, another invitation absent, another consequence of her position made concrete. That is what will move her. Not persuasion. Ravenswood looked at the Duke for a moment with the cautious attention of a man who has known him long enough to sometimes say the thing that should be said. And if it doesn't, he said, The Duke said. Then I will consider what comes next. He picked up his correspondence. The meeting was over. Ravenswood put on his hat and left, and the study was quiet again, and the Duke of Ashbourne sat at his desk and continued his morning's work with the steady, unhurried precision of a man who has decided what needs to be done and has given it to the appropriate mechanisms to accomplish. 3 floors below, in the servants' entrance corridor, the footman who had admitted Ravenswood mentioned to the housekeeper that His Grace seemed in very good spirits this morning. Clear-headed. Focused. The housekeeper agreed and thought no more about it. What the city said. London's social intelligence operated through a network so finely distributed that its nodes were invisible individually but overwhelming in aggregate. It moved through drawing rooms and clubs, through the morning calls of women who understood that information was the most reliable currency available to those who had been denied all others, through the careful correspondence of men who would not commit to paper what they were happy to say over port, through the third-hand relaying of observations that lost nothing in transmission except the name of the person who had first made them. By the morning of the 18th of June, 4 days after the Haverston ball, the following was common knowledge among the 200 families whose opinions constituted London's social verdict. The Duke of Ashbourne's engagement to Miss Evelyn Ashford had not been formally announced at the Haverston ball, contrary to expectation. The reason for this departure from expectation was variously attributed to a sudden illness in the Ashford family, to an unspecified disagreement between the principals, and, in the version that was most enthusiastically circulated, to the disruptive presence at the ball of a Mr. Callum Whitmore, a man of industrial money and apparent radical sympathies, who had been observed in a moment of significant mutual attention with Miss Ashford at some point in the evening. The version involving Whitmore was the most popular not because it was most evidently true, but because it was most narratively satisfying. It had a cause, a consequence, and a villain, which was the minimum requirement for a story worth repeating. Georgiana Hartwell, who had been at the ball and had observed what she had observed, had provided enough specific detail to the version's early circulators to give it a texture of authenticity, without providing enough to be accused of gossip. It was a masterclass in the particular social art of maximum damage with minimum liability. 2 invitations were withdrawn from the Ashford household in the first week. Charlotte Ashford, who had been tentatively included in a private concert at the home of Lady Whitmore, no relation to Callum, found that the inclusion was, upon reflection and oversight, the concert being somewhat more intimate than originally planned. The withdrawal was managed with the correct social language, apologetic, vague, leaving nothing that could be pointed to. Charlotte received it with the careful composure of a 19-year-old who has understood, for the first time, that she is paying for something she did not purchase. She said nothing to anyone, not even Evelyn. Not yet. The Ashford cook noticed that the fishmonger who delivered on Thursdays, a man who also supplied the Ravenswood household and 3 others in the Duke's social proximity, was slightly less accommodating than usual about the premium cut. It was a small thing. It was the kind of thing that, individually, meant nothing. In combination with the other small things arriving daily at the edges of the Ashford household, it meant exactly what it was designed to mean. You are being reminded of your position. Daily. Until you understand it. Evelyn tracked all of it. She kept a private account. Not written down. She was not foolish enough to commit it to paper in a house where paper could be found, but maintained in the clear, cataloging space of her memory, item by item, consequence by consequence. She tracked it not with the despair of someone watching their world diminish, but with the alert attention of someone mapping the enemy's movements in order to understand the strategy. And the strategy, once mapped, was clear, total encirclement. Not a single devastating blow. That would create sympathy, and sympathy was unpredictable. Incremental compression. Daily tightening. The patient, systematic reduction of every comfort and every resource and every social support. until the gap between the life she had refused and the life she was now inhabiting became too wide and too cold to sustain. It was, she acknowledged privately, a brilliant strategy. It was also, she had decided, one she was going to dismantle. But not yet. Not today. First she needed to understand it completely. And first she needed to see Whitmore. The British Museum, late afternoon. She arranged it through the only channel she trusted absolutely. A note carried by the maid who had been with her since she was 14, who understood more about the architecture of discretion than most people twice her age, and whose loyalty was the kind that is produced not by obligation, but by the specific, reciprocal respect of two women in different positions who have recognized each other's intelligence across the social distance between them. The note said, Thursday, 4 o'clock, Greek and Roman antiquities. He was there when she arrived, standing near a display case of Roman portrait busts, not looking at them, looking at the middle distance between them and the doorway through which she would enter, which told her he had been thinking about this moment rather than using the waiting time to observe the collection. She had expected him to be managing the wait. She had not expected him to be simply present in it. She came to stand beside him. The room was occupied, 3 scholars at different tables, a pair of tourists consulting a pamphlet near the far wall, a museum attendant standing at the doorway with the particular vacancy of institutional boredom. They were not alone. They were, as they had always been, required to operate in the full and complicated presence of a world that was watching. Ravenswood's letter, she said, without preamble. You know about it. I know about everything, she said. I have been mapping it since the morning of the 15th. The Hargreaves situation, the Pemberton withdrawal, the Hartley family's sudden inconvenient prior engagement. She paused. Charlotte's concert invitation. He turned his head slightly. I didn't know about the concert. It was small. It was intentional. She kept her voice even, low, calibrated to the room. He is not moving against you specifically. He is constructing a daily atmosphere. Every morning, I am meant to wake and find something new has been closed or withdrawn or cooled. The cumulative pressure is the instrument. I know, Whitmore said. I've seen this pattern before. Not at this scale, not directed at me personally, but I understand the mechanism. He paused. The Northern Consortium has suspended negotiations. The review is currently presented as standard regulatory caution. It's not standard. Someone made a call. Yes, she said. A silence. The tourists near the far wall were consulting their pamphlet with the energetic engagement of people who are genuinely in the presence of something ancient and do not feel the need to perform their interest. One of them said something to the other in German, and the other laughed quietly, and the sound of it, so entirely outside the specific gravity of the conversation happening 12 feet away, was almost disorienting. I need to ask you something, Evelyn said. Ask. The letter you wrote me after the ball, the practical analysis, the financial instrument you described for the Ashford debt. She kept her eyes on the display case. I said no. I said accepting it would be exchanging one dependency for another. She paused. I stand by that. But I need to know, was the offer made because you wanted to help me, or because you wanted to remove a pressure that you feared might move me back toward him? The silence that followed was not the silence of a man constructing an answer. It was the silence of a man deciding whether to say the thing that is true rather than the thing that is more comfortable. Both, he said, in proportions I couldn't separate even if I tried. He paused. Is that a problem? It would be a problem if you had tried to convince me it was only one, she said. The honesty makes it something I can work with. He turned to look at her then, directly, fully, in violation of the social convention that required two unmarried people of opposite sexes in a public place to maintain the polite fiction of not quite looking at each other. She met his gaze, and the quality of what moved between them in that moment was not the electric, consuming thing of popular romantic imagination. It was something quieter and more serious and more permanent. The specific recognition of two people who have assessed each other completely, and found the assessment mutual. "I'm frightened," he said, quietly, without embarrassment. "I know," she said. "So am I." "Not of him," he said. "Of what this costs you. The people around you. Your sister." "I know what it costs," she said. "I knew before I chose. Knowing in advance is different from living it." "Yes," she breathed. "I am living it. It is harder than I anticipated. I am not retreating." She paused, and what came next cost her something. She could feel it costing her as she said it, the specific expenditure of the last carefully maintained reserve of emotional distance she had been keeping for 3 months. "The only thing that is not harder than I anticipated is you. You are exactly what I understood you to be. That is rare. It is more than rare. And I needed you to know that, because I have been careful not to say it, and the carefulness is no longer serving any useful purpose." Something crossed his face that he did not conceal. He said, "Evelyn." She said, "Not here. Not yet. But soon. When there is ground under us." She looked back at the Roman busts. "When we have built some." They stood together in the British Museum on a Thursday afternoon in the summer of 1882, not touching, not speaking, in a silence that held more weight and more certainty than most declarations either of them had witnessed in the course of their lives. Then she said, "I need your help with something." "Tell me." "I am going to write something," she said, "for the Reform Publishing concern, under my own name, about the economics of aristocratic land tenure, framed as analysis, not polemic, but the argument is substantive and it will not be missed by the people who understand these things." She paused. "I am also going to meet with 2 women that Lady Cavendish has offered to introduce. One has publishing connections. One has capital that does not pass through any network the Duke controls." Another pause. "I am not doing this to defeat him. I am doing it to build something that does not require his goodwill for its survival. Do you understand the difference?" "Yes," he said. "I need to know if there are connections on your side, investors, political contacts, anyone who has reason to want a different arrangement of things and is not yet committed to remaining inside the Duke's orbit, that we could be building towards simultaneously." The "we" was the first time she had used it. He registered it. He said, "Lord Fenwick." "Tell me." He sat on the Commerce Committee. He's been watching the situation, not aligned with the Duke, not aligned with me, but watching. He is the kind of man who decides which side of a historical shift to stand on based on where the shift is actually going, not where it's been. I think he is close to deciding. Then we need to give him something to decide toward, she said. They stood for another moment. Then she said, "I have to go. The longer I am absent from the house, the more questions are generated." "I know." She began to move away. She had taken 3 steps when he said, quietly, still facing the display case, "Evelyn." She stopped, didn't turn. "I am not going anywhere," he said. She stood still for 1 moment. Then she walked out of the antiquities room and down the broad museum corridor and out into the July afternoon, and she did not look back, and she did not need to. Charlotte. She came to Evelyn's room at 11 o'clock on the night of the 21st of June. She did not knock. She never knocked. This had been their understanding since they were children, that the door between them was not a barrier but a courtesy, observed only when observation was specifically required. She sat on the edge of Evelyn's bed in her nightgown with her dark hair loose and her face arranged in the expression that Evelyn recognized as Charlotte suppressing something she was no longer certain she could continue suppressing. Evelyn set down her book and waited. "The Hartley match is over," Charlotte said. Not bitterly. With the precise, flat delivery of someone reporting a fact they have had several days to absorb and have now absorbed completely. It was not a delay. His mother wrote to ours this morning. Given the uncertainty surrounding the family's current situation, they felt it inadvisable to proceed. Evelyn said, "Charlotte, let me finish." Charlotte's voice was steady. "I'm not angry with you. I want to be clear about that first, because what I'm going to say next might sound like anger, and it isn't. It's something more complicated than anger." She paused. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to give me the true answer. not the managed answer. Not the answer that takes into account what I can bear to hear. Ask, Evelyn said. Is this real? Charlotte said. Whitmore. Is this the real thing? Not a principle. Not a statement about freedom or choice or the architecture of power. Those things may all be true, and I believe they are, but I need to know if he is real. If what you feel is real. Because if it's real, if it's actually, genuinely real, then I can hold what's happening. I can hold it and keep going. But if it's a principle that has borrowed the shape of a feeling, then I need to know that too, because then what I've lost is, it's... Her voice stopped. Not because she was crying. Charlotte did not cry, as a rule, in front of other people. Because she had reached the edge of what she had prepared to say and found that the next part required more than she had brought with her. Evelyn looked at her sister. Really looked at her. Not with the careful management of a woman accustomed to controlling the emotional temperature of every room she occupied, but with the full, unguarded attention that she reserved for almost no one. It's real, she said. The simplicity of it sat between them. Both things are true, Evelyn continued. The principle is real. The argument is real. I would have had to refuse him eventually regardless. I understand that now, perhaps better than I understood it in March, because the Duke himself confirmed it when he sat in our drawing room and told me, with perfect sincerity and no awareness of what he was confessing, that I was institutional, that I was structural, that I was a mechanism. She paused. But Whitmore is also real. Separately, the feeling is not borrowed from the argument. The argument gave me the language, but the feeling was there before the language. Another pause. Yes, he is real. It is the most real thing I have experienced. Charlotte looked at her for a long moment. Then I need you to win, she said. Evelyn blinked. Not for me, Charlotte said. Don't mistake me. I'm not asking you to win to recover my prospects, though I would not object to that consequence. I'm asking you to win because you have chosen something at a cost that other people are paying, and the cost has to be worth it. Not just worth it to you. Worth it in the way that means something was built that matters. She held Evelyn's gaze with the directness that had always been slightly more visible in the younger sister, the one who had watched the older manage and suppress and construct and had decided, at some formative point, that she would do less of the managing and more of the saying. You've spent your whole life being excellent at containing yourself. I need you to be excellent at something else now. I need you to build something they cannot take. The room was very quiet. When did you become this? Evelyn said. I learned from watching you, Charlotte said. Just, without the self-suppression component. Evelyn looked at her sister. And then she did something she had not done in years. She reached across the bed and took Charlotte's hand, and held it, and did not speak, and Charlotte held hers back, and they sat together in the way that sisters who understand each other completely occasionally need to sit, in the shared weight of a situation neither of them chose, but both of them were going to survive. The Duke's visit, private confrontation. He came on a Tuesday. No advance notice. No letter. He arrived at 4 o'clock, the time of the old Thursday calls, shifted by 2 days in the way that small alterations in the details of power communicate large shifts in its terms, and the footman admitted him because no instruction had been given to refuse him, and the Viscount Ashford, who was in the house, came to the entrance hall and received him with the expression of a man who has been dreading this visit and is now experiencing the relief of confronting the thing he dreaded. Evelyn came downstairs. The Duke was standing in the morning room when she entered, standing, not seated, which communicated that this was not a social call. He was precisely as he always was, immaculate, composed, occupying the room with the comfortable authority of a man who has never entered a space that did not feel like it already belonged to him. She stood across from him. Your Grace, she said. Miss Ashford. He looked at her steadily. I want to speak plainly. Please, she said. The communication you sent me on the morning of the 15th was clear, he said. I have read it carefully, and I have considered it carefully. I am here because I believe, because I am willing to believe, that it was written in a state of considerable emotional pressure, following an evening of social complexity, and that it represents a position which, on reflection, you may wish to revisit. It does not, she said. He did not react to this. He had anticipated it. I am prepared, he continued, as though she had not spoken, to propose a period of formal abeyance, 6 weeks, during which no public positions are taken by either party, and during which the current, disruptive influences, might be given the opportunity to demonstrate their true character to you without the romantic atmosphere that I think has, perhaps, obscured your assessment of them. By disruptive influences, she said, you mean Mr. Whitmore. I mean anything that has introduced noise into a situation that does not require noise, he said. I am not asking you to make a permanent decision today. I am asking you to permit the space for clarity. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. She had prepared for this conversation. She had rehearsed it in the privacy of her room across several sleepless early morning hours, testing his likely arguments against her responses, adjusting for the specific intelligence of the man she was responding to. But preparation, she now discovered, was not the same as being in the room. Being in the room with the Duke of Ashbourne was a different experience from preparing for it. There was a quality of presence to him that was not precisely intimidating, but was entirely gravity-altering. The specific weight of a man who has spent 42 years being the most powerful person in every room he has entered. She felt it. She spoke through it. I understand the offer, she said. I understand what it represents and what would be required of me to accept it. The answer is no. A silence. Then I think, the Duke said, that you are choosing a path whose full extent you have not yet seen. I have seen its extent, she said. I have been tracking it since the 15th. The contracts, the invitations, the Caldwell and Pierce letter that I expect will reach my father this week. She held his gaze. I am not surprised by any of it, and I am not retreating from it. Something crossed his face, not quite surprise, not quite admiration, but a specific recalibration. The expression of a man who has received information that requires him to update a model. You understood the Caldwell and Pierce letter was coming, he said. Yes, she said. Before it arrived. Yes. Another silence. Longer this time. I underestimated you, he said. And as in the Haverston Library, the words carried no warmth. They were pure analytical statement. The acknowledgement of a calculation that had been wrong. I formed a picture of you that was, I see now, a picture of what I required you to be rather than what you are. That is an unusual experience for me. I know, she said. I wonder, he said, very quietly, if you understand what I am going to do next. She met his eyes. I know what the options are, she said. Then you understand that I have resources available to me that make the current situation look comfortable by comparison. I understand that you believe you do, she said. I also understand that those resources depend on certain conditions remaining stable that I am no longer certain are as stable as you believe them to be. She paused, and this was the moment she had rehearsed most carefully, the line she had decided to use not as a bluff, but as a declaration of the direction she was moving. The world is changing, Your Grace. Not the world you operate in. That world is very much as you have always known it, but the world around it. And the world around it is beginning to have opinions about the world you operate in. I believe you have read Mrs. Voss. The Duke looked at her. Mrs. Eleanor Voss had published her first column that morning. It had not named him. It had described the situation with the elegant, precise anonymity of a writer who understands that specificity can be achieved through accumulation of accurate detail, even in the absence of names. Every person who mattered had read it by noon. The Duke had read it at 8:30. He said, I see that you have more allies than I gave you credit for. I have one ally who matters very much to me, she said, and several people who have their own reasons to be interested in the shape of things. A pause. That is different from an alliance. But it may become one. He looked at her for a long time. Then he said, Your father's situation with Caldwell and Pierce is serious, Evelyn. He used her given name for the first time, and it was not an intimacy. It was a pressure. The careful removal of the formal distance between them to make space for something more personal, more affecting. I am telling you this not as a threat. I am telling you as a man who does not wish to see a family he has respected suffer unnecessarily. There is still a path through this that preserves everyone's dignity and everyone's security. She felt this land. She had been prepared for anger, for cold authority, for the language of ultimatum. She had not fully prepared for this, for the version of the Duke that sounded, despite everything, like genuine concern. And she understood, with the sharp, uncomfortable clarity of someone whose intelligence rarely fails them at the wrong moment, that the concern might be real, that the Duke was not, had never been, a simple villain. He was a man who believed in his world and believed that she belonged in it and believed with absolute sincerity, that what he was doing was protecting her from a mistake. The understanding of this did not change anything, but it made it harder. And harder was real, and real had to be lived through. "I understand your concern," she said. Her voice was very even. "I know it is not entirely performance. And I, genuinely, wish the situation were different. But it is not different, and the answer remains no." He held her gaze for one more long moment. Then he nodded. Once. He put on his hat. He looked at her, not with the assessing look of their Thursday calls, not with the recalibrating look of someone updating a model, but with something she had not seen in him before and could not entirely classify. Something that, in a different life, might have been called loss. He left. The room was very quiet. Evelyn stood in the center of it for a long time. Then she sat down. She gave herself 3 minutes. She felt the full weight of it. Of him, of the conversation, of the specific cost of refusing a man who was not entirely wrong about what he could do and not entirely dishonest about his regret. 3 minutes. Then she picked up her pen.